Putin is losing Crimea and Russian nuclear threats are losing power. These and other topics we will discuss right now. It's our YouTube channel War and Politics 24. It's me, Irina Uzlova, and Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report, and communication instructor of the University of Wisconsin and a county supervisor in Rock County, Wisconsin, is with us. Yuri, glad to see you. Hello, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you for the invitation. Always glad to do this. The world is a crazy place, but we can still talk about it, so that's a great thing.
Yes, and it's good that we are not crazy. We try to make it in the same way. Okay, the New Yorker reported that Atacam strikes won't stop the Russians, but Putin's nuclear threats are losing power. Can you agree with these statements?
How can I deny? I think that we see that Russia is struggling on every level at this point, including that Russia's central bank said on Wednesday it will suspend buying foreign currency on the domestic market for the rest of 24. There are a lot of problems. And I think that right now Putin is more than ever concerned about buying time, and so everything I think is being viewed from that perspective of what does he have to do to prolong his slide for as long as possible, or specifically until a different administration comes into White House that is much more willing to find common ground with Russia than the current administration, and perhaps that will have some positive effect on Russia. But I think it's pretty obvious that the problems are far bigger than even stopping the war in Ukraine at this point can contain. So I think Russia is going to be struggling, and it's going to be struggling more and more. And as people, or everyday people in Russia, realize their money just doesn't pay the bills, doesn't buy food, doesn't get them what they need, Russia is going to be facing a lot of problems that they will not be able to postpone until a date certain in the future. They're going to be dealing with reality, whether they like it or not.
Yes, we see a disaster with ruble in Russian economical sphere. So we see that Oreshkin was a threat only for Russian Federation, yes?
It is possible that I think that the nuclear hysteria that we are observing is a very real thing, in a sense that, having lived in the United States in early 2000s after 9/11 and seeing how we talked about the weapons of mass destruction that were supposedly in Iraq and how the justification for the war, that pre-war hysteria, that can be manufactured. It is possible to get people that excited about anything if there's enough pressure, and right now we're seeing hysteria rising up from the Kremlin with Putin and his weird statements and messages without his arms moving, but with all of those terrible things that he says about how they're going to change the nuclear doctrine, and Ukraine couldn't do anything without the guidance and control of the evil West, and so therefore he is justified to do anything and everything. And then, of course, like you said, Oreshnik, and then that, and all the merchandising apparently that came with it. I didn't know that weapon systems were coming. Well, of course, I mean, we live in a different world where people name their children Javelin. But in Russia, they have apparently, Oreshnik everything from T-shirts to I don't even know what. The vodka brand, I think, is now of this thing. So they're just crazy about this. It's like some countries can create cars. Some countries can raise level of existence for their residents, and some countries like North Korea and apparently Russia can create horrifying weapons and be proud of it, because there is nothing else apparently to be proud of. This is the reduction of all the great culture, of all of that. No, in the end, they're just proud of their bombs, of their ability to destroy the world in a variety of ways. And we are observing in the West how this is like, it's amazing for me, because because I feel like people almost want to buy into this. There's this weird desire to say, wow, things are horrible and they're getting worse and everything is like we're just surrounded by tragedy and things are horrible, and what do we do now? And maybe we should just stop and negotiate in peace and everything will be somehow magically worked out if we just stop fighting now. Even though it's been said for a long time that this war would end, if Russia would stop and if it was fighting, but if Ukraine would stop fighting, Ukraine would end. And so this axiom really hasn't changed. We continue to live in the same reality where Ukraine is fighting for its existence, but United States is now looking at Russia that possibly is threatening to use nuclear weapons, even though it's been threatening it for 3 years. And as was pointed out by Professor Dr. Timothy Snyder, proof that this is all fakery is the fact that no Russian has left New York or London or any of those big metropolises that are supposed to be, on the target list, and moved their family back to Moscow because they know the chances of that are not that high that they're going to uproot their family and move them all back to Russia. Come on now. The chances of nuclear war apparently are much lower. So at the same time, we in America really are just this desire. It feeds into our already growing certain insecurity when we talk about what's going on kind of like the progressive liberal side, where there was just a kind of a defeat at the hands of Donald J. Trump at the election, and life already seems like it, people are questioning their faith in God, whether there is, how can this happen if good is supposed to triumph, and then you see Putin with his nuclear threats. It's terrifying. Everything is looking bad. And on the right side, you see what Donald Trump has been saying throughout his election campaign, is that Russia is a very big threat that he is the only one who can find a way to work things out with Russia and with North Korea, because he's a strong man, and big strong Putin, big strong Trump will find a way to make, I guess, peace. And so when those people who already supported Donald J. Trump see what Putin is doing, they're saying, well, this is exactly what the danger is, and this is exactly why we need to have Trump in there. And in fact, those people are concerned that the current administration is actually taking such an active role in, as they would say, irresponsibly escalating the situation to possible World War III with nuclear weapons. Who needs Ukraine if we're talking about losing the entire planet? Just give Ukraine to Russia and let's move on and talk about other things perhaps. Or at least part of Ukraine, even better. So this narrative of nuclear hysteria fits into different segments of our population differently, but it is certainly landing on a kind of a fertile ground, I must admit.
If I understand correct, Putin's nuclear blackmail won't make afraid anybody in this world, as I see. And Areshnik, as you said, is only like powerful thing for Russian authorities, officials, Russian propaganda, and that's all. But how do you think, Yuri? Does Donald Trump like such steps by Putin, like new missiles, or how they call it, new missiles, like Areshnik, or nuclear blackmail, or Donald Trump is angry about it?
Well, we know that in the past, Donald Trump has often praised Putin and has said that various decisions and actions have been undertaken by the Russian president, have been really, I think we can stick with it. He called him genius, right? The invasion, the whole idea of annexation, part of Ukrainian territory prior to invading it. Donald Trump said this was great. So how is he going to be critical of any? Well, we've never heard him be critical of any decision by Putin. It's almost like there was a joke during the George W. Bush administration among comedians, whether George Bush is a great president or the greatest. And so in this situation, why would Donald Trump criticize Putin, who he clearly admires? So this is just, and the fact that Tucker Carlson went to Russia and interviewed Putin and had all those views, and then Tucker Carlson praised Russian economy. This is all fitting into the same narrative that we're seeing. So I would say from Donald Trump's point of view, first of all, we know that Vladimir Putin is a genius. And beyond that, whatever he is doing is a pretty smart move, because this escalation is highlighting exactly what I was just saying, how accurate apparently Donald Trump was talking about Putin, escalation, Joe Biden, World War III, only Trump. Well, now we will have only Trump, who will save us all by making a great deal, although in the past that has been often a challenge. But I think that's where we're existing right now.
But we see that Putin joined North Korean troops for first moment. Yes. Second, Putin attacked Dnieper by medium-range ballistic missiles, nuclear escalation. All these things, we see all these points Putin does. So does Trump understand that Putin, by such behavior, shows to whole world that he doesn't want fair peace in any way?
Well, we have no reason to presume that Donald Trump wants fair peace or whatever the term. I mean, I think those are very manageable terms for depending on the person. I think that it is pretty clear that from the point of view of the Biden administration, this period of escalation that we're now living in, that is currently peaking with this Oreshnik nut tree, is started with North Korea sending troops and agreeing to take part in the war of Russia against Ukraine. So that is, from the point of view of Biden administration, is what brought on all of this, is that North Korea got involved. So whether it is going to be viewed by the same with the same set of even logical approach by the next administration is unclear. I feel like a historical precedent plays a very useful role here, because when Donald Trump was president, was 45th president, he made an agreement with Taliban and turned over to Afghanistan to Taliban and pulled us out. But that was a different situation than we have now, because at the time the situation was that the deal was made by Trump but executed by Biden. So after Trump. And in this instance, Trump is here for 4 years. So therefore, it would seem like it might make him look weak if Ukraine collapsed. Therefore, he would not be interested in seeing Ukraine collapse, at least during his term. And there's every reason so far to believe that this would be the second, therefore the final term of Donald J. Trump. Therefore, it is impossible to predict what will happen after 4 years, but for the foreseeable future, Donald J. Trump may want Ukraine to exist, simply because it would make him look better. And I think that we should not ignore the possibility of a Nobel Peace Prize that could be awarded to 47th president for ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. And I know that there's people who will say that Sweden will never do that, but who knows? I think stranger things have happened. Sweden didn't join NATO for a long time, but now they have. So maybe a Nobel Peace Prize, maybe appearance of a demonstration of that strong manness that Donald Trump is so prizes and so values. All of those factors will play a positive role. But to say that fairness and justice on their own, I think it is reasonable to expect a transactional president that has been advertised as transactional president to act in a transactional manner, and that's just, those are different types of issues.
But Yuri, today we got to know that Alexander Mereshko, a member of parliament, Ukrainian parliament, nominated Donald Trump for the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize, hoping for his help in ensuring peace for Ukraine. So is Alexander Mereshko wrong, or maybe no?
No, I think those are possibly the off-ramps that are being created already as we speak. Just as, I thought that I was imagining this reality, it exists. It already is happening right there. But on the other hand, if there is no peace, there is no peace prize. So it's important that for that peace prize to be awarded, that there is peace. And with Vladimir Putin, I think it's pretty clear that the peace is harder than it may sound or may appear because he doesn't follow agreements that he makes. And that's another big problem and challenge for anybody who's trying to make a deal with Vladimir Putin is that how do you look when the other side doesn't follow through? Of course, Donald J. Trump also has experience and knowledge on how that feels and how that works. And so there's probably a good understanding. But fundamentally it's going to be, I think, whether Donald Trump feels like he won. And if he feels like he won, then it would be effectively a victory for him, no matter what it looks or feels like for anybody or everybody else.
But Yuri, some our experts and analytics told me that Trump can collapse the price of oil, and so we can see the collapse of Russian Federation. Maybe this scenario can be in reality?
I think that without being a big specialist on the topic of fossil fuels, I will just say that this may be a bigger mission than one president can do. And I think even those that credit Ronald Reagan with this for collapse of Soviet Union are maybe even overestimating that particular factor. There were others, such as ruble, which may have a much more important role in collapsing Russia. And perhaps this is an effect of sanctions, because we already know that these sanctions are on Gazprom are possibly one of the big causes for decline of the ruble. But just in general, the sanctions, the regime of sanctions, it's a long-term suffocation of a state. And this is something that Russia has been able to withstand for X amount of time because of reserves, because sanctions are they affect future trade and future interactions and future transactions. And going forward, Russian, it's going to be difficult. However, as part of the Nobel Peace Prize, it is also entirely plausible to presume that sanctions will be removed and Russia will be unshackled through this peace process, which would be a dramatic development, because what do you do if you unshackle a swamp? And I think that's going to be very messy. But I think that inviting Russia back to join the world is also going to have a very limited effect, because there's going to be countries that are not going to go for that. They just can't go for that. And it's going to be, Germany and Western Europe that if they admit that such a deal about territory is possible, then it kind of affects all of their security structure again since World War II. So it's going to be a very strange world where we're going to have boundaries that are and borders that are agreed to by any number of states, but are not what is international order. It's chaos. It's basically chaos. I think, when I first came to America, there was a still they showed on TV, this old sitcom by Mel Brooks called Get Smart, about our agent who was fighting evil organization. An evil organization was called Chaos, and they were supposed to be like making fun of the Soviets. And who knew that this chaos is really such a defining feature of now our age?
The United States has informed the United Nations of North Korea's plans to transfer new ballistic missiles to Russia. This would be in addition to the more than 100 missiles that Russia has already delivered and used to attack Ukrainian cities. So Donald Trump may hold talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, Reuters reports earlier today. So how can such negotiations between Trump and North Korean president can be realistic and successful?
About as successful as his negotiations with Putin. I think we're seeing a very a pattern being set up where democratic heads of democratic states are reaching out for the most part, with the notable exception of Mexico, which is responding back about the tariffs and saying that they can have tariffs of their own against the United States. And there, this could be an interesting dynamic where different countries are going to respond differently in this tariff war that we may be looking at. But negotiations with dictators are not going as swimmingly as at this moment as for Donald Trump as just his interactions with democracies. Unfortunately for all involved, I suppose, or whatever, is that Donald Trump is not particularly interested in good relations with democracies. They're kind of dependent on him anyway. They're kind of his already. Unless he loses Europe, which he might. But his negotiations with North Korea, his negotiations with Putin are going to go slower because when we are shifting from the world of what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing to do, which is kind of a paradigm we lived in for a pretty long amount of time, and now shifting into the paradigm of strength and weakness, and how do you project strength and how do you project weakness, it appears that Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un are just doing things that are expected in that power dynamic of now you're supposed to play coy. If you're a dictator and you're supposed to be hard to get. Okay, we'll see how that works out. But this doesn't really, it's hard to say that this is seriously taking into consideration actual security. But we'll see all of this, how this will turn out. I think it's possible because of chaos particle of this is that anything can happen. But it is also kind of hard to imagine that these relations with North Korea will go very well, because they go better for North Korea if they're not going well, because then they can like a hostage situation, they can ask for more ransom. Why agree right away if you know that these people will want to negotiate with you? Perfect. It's time to increase the ransom. So this is why a lot of people question this approach fundamentally. But now all we are left with is just seeing how it will actually play out, and whether those that were opposed to it were correct, or whether this is actually the right way forward to peace and prosperity for all.
Donald Trump is considering retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg as a special envoy to Ukraine to negotiate about ending Russian-Ukrainian war. What do we know about this man, and what will Trump's special envoy for Ukraine decide? Or will he only carry out Trump's will?
Irina, I think it's very important here to understand that by naming an envoy, and from last information that I just saw as possibly right before we did this interview, is that he's been named. So we'll see if it still is the fact by the time people actually are seeing our conversation. It's amazing the speed of information. We'll just now do news only live, because recorded is impossible. But this Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg was chief of staff for the White House under President Trump 45, his first administration, and also with Mike Pence has worked. And so this uh, this person, this very experienced, actually very elderly statesman, he's 80 years old, offered a plan to President Trump whereby everybody except for Ukraine gets everything that they want, and Ukraine gets kind of like peace. And peace for whatever is Ukraine. So we are moving the conversation, the topic of the borders of 1991 kind of off the table. We're moving NATO off the table. And we're saying that if Ukraine wants to get more aid, Ukraine needs to sit at the table, at negotiation table, and there you go. On one level, it can work out great. Sure, Ukraine may be very willing to offer people who will agree to negotiate on its behalf in exchange for continued military aid, and then just wait for Russia to show up. But it may also have unpredictable consequences. And it's important to acknowledge here that by naming an envoy, President is already showing that this is, on one hand, an extra important task because he is naming a special person to handle this task. But at the same time, he is also shifting his individual perception of certain responsibility away from himself onto this other person. Keith Kellogg, retired lieutenant general, because under current administration, there is no envoy for Ukraine because we have President Biden, who is our guy in charge of foreign policy, and he's got a Secretary of State who does the things that Secretary of State does, and we don't have a special envoy for Ukraine. Now we will. And whether this plan will work, whether there will be other features incorporated like autonomous zones that were mentioned by other candidate for the position, Mr. Grinnell. Either way, this is going to be a plan that ultimately will have to be somehow supported by Trump via a tweet or X in the middle of whatever when we find out that he agrees to something, but we don't know how Putin will respond to this at all. And therefore, this possibly can make Donald Trump, in the eyes of many people, appear to be weak. But once again, if Donald Trump does not feel that he is weak or that he lost anything like his clothes, and it's still perfectly well-dressed president.
Clear, Yuri. And one more question, please. Ukraine continues to pave the way for the liberation of our Crimea, not Russian Crimea, and Putin's military airfield and military college were attacked by Ukrainian drones and maybe even missiles. And how do you think, how much does it hurt Putin understanding about losing Crimea in nearest future? And I think that when long-range missiles were previously launched on Crimea, Putin was silent. Does he really understand that Crimea doesn't belong to the Russian Federation?
Every attack by weapons that were supposed to bring on Oreshnik down upon all of us, that are not resulting in Oreshnik being brought down upon all of us, at this point highlight, yes, Putin's unpredictability, but also Putin's weakness. Because for 3 years, he's been threatening the West to use these weapons, and now he's even willing to show what it would look like if he was using them, if they were actually nuclear weapons. But this is not even the first time that he's used weapons and rockets that are capable of delivering nuclear payloads. So this is it's a conversation that's been going on and on for a long time. And I think that it's important and relevant to really point out the bravery and of Ukrainian people. You know, I went to Ukraine a couple of months ago and had the privilege, honor of meeting you, and just seeing how people of Ukraine have come together to stand against this war of aggression. and how people the solidarity of people of Ukraine and how they're working together. I think this is the spirit that has the potential to be the key to Ukraine's victory, because America and different allies at this point will not only change or undergo changes, but may try to sign agreements that may not include Ukraine. But whatever United States or any country does to any other country behind its back, it still is a decision of Ukraine to fight and not fight. And Ukrainians have been bravely making this decision, made this decision really since annexation of Crimea, and to this day, and especially since for the last almost 3 years now. So no matter what decision is made by any politician anywhere outside of Ukraine, the fate of Ukraine is in the hands of Ukrainians, and it really gives me a lot of confidence for Ukraine, because I feel that people in Ukraine are really quite competent and capable, and part of the reason that Soviet Union was as successful as it was in big part because it had Ukraine as its bread basket, as its certain brain basket. It was just a lot of people that this is part of the reason why is Russia fighting so hard for Ukraine now. Are they fighting to get their brains back? It may be too late for them. But Ukraine is something that I think has a lot of future, a lot of potential, a lot of great people both inside and outside the country who will work together to make sure that Ukraine is victorious, no matter what any politician anywhere tries to do.
Yes, and now Russian Federation has nothing except war, blood, failure, and crazy Russian dictator. But it's their choice. Yuri, thank you very much. Thank you for your opinion, for your choice, and for your time. See you next week. Goodbye.
Thank you.
And take care of yourself. Bye. Yuri Rashkin, host of Yuri Rashkin Report, was with me, Irina Uzlova. Thank you guys for joining. Leave your comment, please, and stay with us. Goodbye.